Greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV radio and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I am Steve Deace, and we are brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American, but don't get it because they share your values. Get it because it's great coffee, and then because they share your values. It is a great product. We've heard rave reviews, beginning with Aaron, and Mr. Monotone over there is not easy to please. Try it for yourself or try it again when you go to firstcup.com. Use the promo code DACE and you'll get 10% off your order. For promo code DACE at firstcup.com. Promo code DACE at firstcup.com. And if you subscribe, you'll get an additional 10% off for the life of your subscription as well. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE. There's just a few things going on in the world and in the country right now. Here's what's going on the show today. Bob Vander Plaats is going to join us at the bottom of this hour. The top of next hour, we have a short week this week, so I want to let you know about that. With the holiday, I know a lot of you do too. So we have Thursday and Friday off on the show. Wednesday will be a special 2-hour edition of Buy, Sell, or Hold. We're going to do Buy, Sell, or Hold for an entire day on Wednesday's program. So we've got a lot to get to here with the short holiday week with everything going on. So Bob Vander Plaats will join us at the bottom of the hour. Next hour, Steven Whitlow is going to join us. He is part of a new effort that includes our good friend Megan Basham over at Daily Wire of essentially attempting to do to the evangelical church. I want to make sure as I try to narrow down what this means, Todd, correct me on this, but they are basically attempting to do to the evangelical church what, when we first started Conservative Review many, many years ago, attempted to do to the Republican Party, okay? Hold it accountable from the right, essentially.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think you just nailed it, yeah.
And that's essentially what they're trying to do to the evangelical church, which is hold it accountable from the angle of orthodoxy and not from relevance and not from popularity. And because we used to have publications like Christianity Today that used to do this decades ago. Now it's Christianity. Then it became Christianity Seldom, and now it's Christianity Never. Okay. And this used to be what the Gospel Coalition used to do. And now it's the woke coalition, right? And so they're essentially trying to step into that breach. And it's very much needed. And I think it also needs to be across denominational lines to do this, because we have some people that do it, but that do it well to some degree, but they also basically, like there's one site we all like and follow that has some great clips, but they also are hardcore cessationist Calvinists. And so basically everybody other than John MacArthur and his style of preaching is heresy. Okay. And so there needs to be a broader coalition of people looking at this as opposed to just one angle and perspective on things, because everybody is accountable to small o orthodoxy. And so we're going to introduce you to that effort coming up next hour. And then there is so much going on right now with Biden and will he go? The Trump immunity ruling came down earlier today. I'm going to tell you right now, I'll explain later in the show. The ruling, I can't believe I'm saying this. I would have never guessed 3 to 6 months ago I was going to say this, but with the events that have transpired, the ruling is politically irrelevant, and I'll explain why later in the show. For now, we'll explain the ruling a little bit later on, but basically, presidents do not have absolute immunity, as Trump asked for. They do retain immunity for what the court calls, quote, official acts. It doesn't necessarily describe what official acts are, doesn't describe what unofficial acts are, okay, and leaves that up to be decided and litigated later on. All right. So we'll get to all of that. But of course, this weekend, one of the most extraordinary. And I said when we signed off Thursday night from debate coverage on the Blaze, you just witnessed maybe the most impactful presidential debate in American history. And you if you paid attention at all this weekend, you saw things you thought you'd never see. I mean, the American left is in open war against itself right now. And not even, we have to rally around Biden tweets from Barack Obama and Bill Clinton that came just mere hours apart on Saturday afternoon were enough to deter the New York Times and Washington Post and other major papers and op-ed pages, or the New Yorker. All right, this would be the equivalent. If you don't, I don't read any of those. That's a different America. Okay, But what they're doing in America is impacting what's going to happen to the rest of America here. Imagine Fox, the Daily Wire, the Blaze, and the Washington Examiner, the 4 largest platforms on the American right, all got together and said the Republican nominee, whoever it is, has to step aside. This is the equivalent of that on their end. And they're doing it. And imagine we were doing this like at the same time, like who would be, well, Rush passed on. We don't really have a lot of great elder statesmen right now, right? You know? We really don't. So I mean, imagine if like Newt Gingrich and George W. Bush, those would be the closest we have to elder statesmen on the right, even though they're different factions and stuff. But, you know, we really don't have much right now, right? Okay. Most of our promising talent is in the future, which the boomer generation just won't let us get to. Okay. So looking back behind us, probably the 2 biggest names still alive, Newt and George W. Bush.
Sure.
Fair. Imagine if those guys got together and declared that we had to rally around the Republican nominee and every other major platform said, no, he's got to go. That is the equivalent of what is occurring on the left right now. So, I mean, these are extraordinary times. So extraordinary, it will take us 2 separate segments to discuss and to break down, all right? Which we will do as we get started today with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Democrats trying to imagine what could be, but being heavily burdened by what has been. We are living in a different political world than we were 96 hours ago. How consequentially different, that remains to be seen. But Democrats are in a full-fledged civil war. Combatants on one side include the Biden campaign, Barack Obama, and top leaders in the DNC. On the other side, you have the mainstream and legacy media and anonymous Democrat officials at basically every level of government. The former seems dead set on riding with Biden full speed ahead. The latter is smelling blood, weakness, or a combination of the two. Just hours after his disastrous debate performance, in which around 80 million people saw Biden's cognitive decline in real time, the president was in North Carolina, where he explained why he sucked so bad.
No, I'm not a young man. I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth.
That was the Biden campaign's first foray into justifying the octogenarian staying in the race. Barack Obama and Bill Clinton soon lent their support via messages on social media. But then the New York Times editorial board unleashed a column calling on Biden to cease his campaign. Outlets like the New Yorker, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and others soon ran op-eds following suit calling for Biden to step aside in the race for the White House, but not from his current job. All weekend, we were inundated with stories about Biden's cognitive decline from outlets like Axios, which is essentially another Democrat mouthpiece who unloaded on the Bidens. Headline, top aides shielded Biden from staff but couldn't hide the debate. Headline, behind the curtain, what scares Democrats most. Headline, 2 Joe Bidens, the night America saw the other one. Axios detailed in those pieces, among other things, that Biden aides for years have been careful to keep Biden at arm's length from other White House staff, that Biden is, quote, dependably engaged between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., and how numerous Democrats, even some close to Biden, are quietly, anonymously pulling for him to drop out of his re-election race. But it wasn't just digital left-wing media like Axios unloading. Legacy media got in on the action as well. Over the weekend, NBC News reported that Biden was, quote, humiliated over his debate performance. And this is how NBC and Kristen Welker opened Meet the Press on Sunday morning.
It is yet another extraordinary moment in the 2024 election cycle, with Democrats in a state of crisis after President Joe Biden delivered a disastrous debate performance that fueled voters' top concerns about his age and ability to serve another 4 years in office.
Elsewhere in legacy media, $10 to the poll jar, CBS News ran a post-election poll showing only 55% of registered Democrats believe Biden should remain the Democratic nominee. The Associated Press reported Saturday afternoon a phone call between brass at the DNC and various Democrat leaders who anonymously told the AP the DNC gaslit them on Biden's debate performance and gave a cold shoulder to any notion that Biden should step aside. Politico reported this morning Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer personally put out the SOS. Michigan is at risk with Biden at the top of the ticket, even as she shirks the draft Whitmer miniature movement. Nevertheless, the Biden campaign came out with a fundraising email over the weekend, again attempting to justify Biden's continued presence in the race, showing other Democrats from Buttigieg to Newsom to Whitmer and others also losing to Donald Trump. On Sunday, the White House again, flailing at this point to justify Biden's presence in the race, put out this video.
Democracy is the essence of who we are. We're
One,
the most unique nation in the world. In that
two,
we're not united based on race, ethnicity, geography. We're based on idea.
three,
we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all women and men are created equal. It's in our
four,
Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. They're the two
five,
things that are the guardrails to make sure democracy is able to be sustained. It's all
six,
about being able to show up and vote, be able to have an opportunity to get a fair deal, get an even chance. It all
seven,
rests upon our Constitution, and democracy is the vehicle and the
eight,
method that holds that together.
8 jump cuts in 38 seconds. 8. Nancy Pelosi, who some reports have stated is privately wary of the drag Joe Biden presents at the top of the ticket for Democrats, went on CNN to claim it's actually Donald Trump who has dementia.
There are healthcare professionals who think that Trump has dementia, that his connection, his thoughts do not go together. And, while he may be saying we're enablers, we see Joe Biden up close. We know how attuned he is to the issues, how informed he is. And I debate with him about legislation, and not debate, but discuss it with him. He's right there. So in any case, it was a bad night. Let's not sugarcoat that.
The New York Times reporting Sunday of a Biden family confab, which went down at Camp David, says Hunter Biden is one of the leading voices within that family, encouraging his father to continue on in the race. And then there's this, in the most serendipitous timing of all time, Dr. Jill Biden is on the cover of the July edition of Vogue magazine with these words: "We will decide our future." Oh, and finally this, the Supreme Court ruled this morning, the presidents have absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for all official acts when they are president. No immunity from unofficial acts, clear as mud. John Roberts wrote the 6-3 decision and says lower courts need to work out what constitutes official versus unofficial acts. And that's what happened while we were away.
One of the most unbelievable montages we've ever had. And when you consider what we've all endured the last few years, I mean, that is saying something. Wow. I mean, incredible, Aaron. Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Constitution Wealth. They are the Patriots' choice in wealth management. If you are out there attempting to avoid doing business with people who hate your values, why not apply the exact same principle to your retirement, to your 401k, to your investment portfolio? They can help you to do that with a solid investment plan at Constitution Wealth. They'll reduce your investments in woke schemes like ESG, DEI, and more. And this is also your opportunity to work with them to build the parallel economy by working with a company that shares your values. Why would you choose anyone else? All right. Sign up today and get a free consultation when you go to constitutionwealth.com/blaze. That's constitutionwealth.com/blaze. Get a free consultation today at constitutionwealth.com/blaze. Okay. I don't even know where to start. All right.
That's actually a very healthy place to start from, because if anybody tells you they know exactly what's going on, yikes.
And I also want to try to avoid saying things that may not prove to be irrelevant by the time, if you are listening to the podcast version of this, that it gets posted early afternoon. Okay? So good luck. So pray for me. I'm going in. Let's take a step back. And first we got to understand the environment. All right? In politics, you can't you cannot change an environment from the inside out. Meaning candidates, campaigns cannot change environments from the inside out. Similar to how you and I cannot change our environment in our natural habitat from the inside out. I can scream at January all I want and go out there, suns up, guns out, or suns out, guns out, but it'll still be January, right? Doesn't really care what my, inclinations are, preferences are. It's going to be January nevertheless. And so I need to recognize that environment and turn it to my advantage. So I invent coats and gloves and hats and boots and snow tires. you also can't change your own environment in politics. You have to recognize what your environment is and then come up with a strategy that takes the best advantage of it. Until Thursday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, this was the environment in this election. There were two driving forces environmentally in this cycle. Number one, a majority of Americans do not want to have to vote for Donald Trump. Number two, a majority of Americans think Joe Biden is too old to vote for. Those were the two driving environmental forces dictating everything else. And up until 9 o'clock Eastern on Thursday, the former was the driving force. Everything was even if it was good news for Trump, everything was analyzed through that factor. Hey, Trump's doing better with independence in this date, or about everything was from the Trump factor. It was like Biden wasn't president. It was completely a referendum on Trump. Trump's a criminal, a convict. They're going to put him in prison. Everything was through that prism. And then the minute Joe Biden walked out on the stage, and ever since, the whole paradigm has shifted. And now the second environmental factor is what's driving everything now. That a majority of the American people think Joe Biden's too old to vote for. In that CBS poll that Aaron cited, 72% of all Americans believe Joe Biden is too old to run for president. 72%. Now, if they keep him on the ballot on November the 5th, will that number be 72%? No. But I'll bet you it's at least 42 or 52%, and you're done. That's the driving factor in this race. And it will be, unless something else we cannot foresee organic occurs to change it. Because they can't change the environment. They have fired every bullet at Donald Trump you can imagine. He's an insurrectionist. He's a Russian traitor asset. He's a rapist. He is a liar. He's an adulterer. He's a Nazi. He's a fascist. There's literally nothing left. They're taking his money away. There's nothing left to do to Donald Trump but kill him. They just have to Epstein him. There's nothing left. There's no further political branding to do. They fired every bullet. And even after doing that, this was at best for them a 60-40 election in their favor. At best. Now what's happened is it's a 60-40 election in Trump's favor, maybe at worst, because the whole paradigm has shifted. They never were going to have a record to defend. And now they have an incompetent figure. This is Herbert Hoover, 1932. This is Jimmy Carter, 1976. It took the Republican Party 20 years to dig out from Herbert Hoover. It required them getting maybe the country's greatest war hero since George Washington to do it. It took the Democratic Party almost 20 years to dig out from Jimmy Carter. 1976 to 1992. Before they won another presidential election. And so what you're watching right now is you're watching the long-standing left political class. And those with future ambitions on the left are trying to put every pressure they can to push him out. Because they see that what I'm telling you is true. The plan to make this a referendum on Trump is toast. Something organic that we do not understand yet and could not possibly predict right now must occur for that to switch, which means for the first time, they are not in control of the process. They've been in control of this process ever since they indicted Donald Trump with Alvin Bragg, and the primary polling switched overnight. And basically that canceled the primary. They have been in control of this process. They're not in control of it for the first time, and that's why they're scared. That doesn't necessarily mean Trump is in control, but they're not. Events are beyond their control. They can do a press conference next week or tomorrow, and they're all going to rally around him, and the Washington Post and all these people gaslight us again and pretend like they never wrote these op-eds, just like they reversed a century of research on masks in 5 minutes. And then we could just have the president go out there one time in between now and the next election in the 127 days and completely blink out. Even that North Carolina speech, when you watch the clips where he's not talking, it looks exactly like the debate. Why? Because he has dementia. Why is he engaged from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.? Because he has dementia. That's classic. It's called sundowning. All right? Late morning, early afternoon, they're always their most alert while they're still at functional stages of cognitive impairment and decline. They no longer control this process. It's out of their control. The stuff that Axios had, that Aaron had, that stuff's all being leaked from within the Democratic Party and probably the White House. There's open dissension there because people are seeing their own futures are tied to him, and they don't want to just sit here for the next 5 months and watch their futures end. And they're also trying to set up a future narrative that if they can't push him out and he loses, and he will, they will absolutely lose if he is the face of their party, barring an event that we cannot foresee, like a scamdemic or an assassination or something that we could not possibly predict. Barring that, they will lose. And so then what they're also going to try to do is make it look like it was just a Biden loss because he was too old, so that they don't get tagged with a referendum on all of their policies. The campaign at this point is tailor-made for Trump. He's not wanted to talk about issues most of this campaign. He's not wanted to give out definitive plans most of this campaign, and now he doesn't have to. The whole thing can just be a troll meme fest. The president is senile, correct. And a majority of the American people agree. I think it's very possible they will lose 35 states if Joe Biden is their nominee. So do they, which is why they're behaving like this. Which brings me to the 25th Amendment. I want to respond to some people who have been negative about my buddy Congressman Chip Roy's calling for a resolution to vote on in the House, which would demand that the cabinet and vice president invoke the 25th Amendment, given the impairment of the president. This is, I believe, a very important election, so important that I am willing to support a guy I've been very pointed in my criticism of, in Donald Trump. But we are still 200 days away from the absolute earliest Donald Trump could take the White House. We are now sitting in an era where the entire world knows the president is cognitively impaired and not making decisions. They also are looking at all the polling data that Aaron just cited, and you know what they're probably thinking? In North Korea and Iran and in Moscow and in Beijing, oh no, the guy that signs Abrahamic Accords and drops Moabs is due to return. If we've got any more mischief up our sleeves, got to do it now. The clock is ticking. By the way, little story, didn't make many headlines over the weekend. Did you guys see that we raised our alerts status of our embassies in the European Union to the second highest level available other than outright war? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Just kind of went under the radar while we're focusing on all this palace intrigue and within the Democratic Party. But that's the kind of stuff that happens when people are like, oh, so the vegetable is going to be gone. We better maybe put some plans in place now. I mean, and Trump himself has said, hey, Putin invaded Ukraine under Obama, did not invade under me, and invaded under Biden. Those things are all true, right? Well, if that's the case, if that math is true, then it works the other way too, right? Why wouldn't Putin sit there and think, I might have been willing to settle for just the Donbas, but maybe I want to see what Oslo's like this time of year. If you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Given what we're showing, the feebleness, the weakness, the total dissension within the White House, you bet your ass. You can sit here and say, well, we just leave Biden to sit there so we can win, until you wake up one morning and Pyongyang has gone October 7th on Seoul. And suddenly you're hopeful that you're going to have another. The kind of stuff, if that goes down, the kind of stuff that would follow will make you hope that you're going to have a next election. 200 days is a long time to have a vegetable in the White House who now everybody knows is not making the decisions. And we're not everybody, guys. We're a sliver of the country. We're not everybody. This is why we must invoke the 25th. This is why Republicans must put this resolution on the floor and make Democrats vote on it. Some of you have even said, some of my colleagues in this industry, Chip Roy is helping the Democrats. Yes, I am sure the Democrats are like, we were going to do nothing until Chip Roy said something. Guys, what came first? CNN and MSNBC with total post-debate meltdown saying Biden has to leave the race, or on Thursday night, or Chip Roy Friday morning calling for the invocation of the 25th Amendment. What came first? Well, given that one event happened on Thursday night, that came first, guys. They weren't just sitting around over there on the Democratic side saying, well, let's find out what Chip Roy thinks and then respond. No. They're going to do what they want to do without not giving a rip what Chip Roy or any of us thinks. And if we let them, what they will likely end up doing is pushing him out in the next couple of weeks and then leaving him in the White House because we don't have a counter narrative. We should be running the counter narrative right now. If he's unfit to run, he's unfit to be president. We should be running that narrative right now. That should be everywhere on the right now. But it's not, because we're dumb and we're terrible at this. So when they concoct a scenario in the next couple of weeks where they run him out of town, and then they can leave him in the White House and then just bypass Kamala and put someone in there that's not just 24/7 cringe, don't say I didn't try. Don't say I didn't, and they put someone there that's going to be way harder for Trump to beat. I don't want to hear 127. If that goes down, do not come to me 127 days later and blame it on me. I did my part. Chip Roy did his part. This is the smart play. Actually, by the way, Chip told me over the weekend he called Bannon before they put him in prison, and Bannon agreed, by the way. Because at the very least, let's put see, here's what a resolution on the House floor would do. It would cause debate. And I would love to see Democrat congressmen and women get up there and explain, what did they know about the president's mental impairment and when did they know it? What did they, and by the way, sending Nancy Pelosi out to sit there and stutter and stammer her way through with early onset dementia, if that's the best you got, Trump's winning 35 states. Okay? Make them own this. It's the singular issue in the country. Hell, it's the singular issue in the world. Make them totally own it. That they've run, especially after the Chevron ruling, striking down a lot of the administrative state. Make them own that we all know now that what we claimed was true. They have been running a shadow presidency. This guy's not been calling the shots. He's not been running the show the entire time. And the American people deserve to know who is. And if we don't make that case, and every day that we don't, we risk them swapping him out, bypassing Kamala, because we're now responding to their narrative and putting someone in there that'll be way tougher for Trump to beat, which is basically almost anybody other than Kamala and Biden, by the way. Almost anybody. This is a rare thing where it's a good thing for the country. We can't have a vegetable with the nuclear launch codes. Full stop. Full stop. Can't do that, right? On the other hand, it also forces them make a decision. Because if you invoke the 25th, then they have to be stuck with Kamala at that point. But every day we don't do this, we are missing an opportunity to take control of the cycle. No one's in control. They've been in total control this entire time. No one is in control right now. This is our opportunity to take control. But I regret to inform you the Republican Party is happening again. Instead, we'll just sit back, say nothing, hope they're dumb enough to keep Biden in there the whole time and we can run against them. They might be. They might not be able to pull this off. But man, I am tired of waiting and hoping my opponents step on rakes to win. I like being in control of isn't that what Dominion, our whole entire theme this year is about? I like being in control as much as I possibly can. And here's the opportunity to take control and lead. The Democrats don't care what Chip Roy thinks or any of us. They're going to do what they want to do, can do anyway. How about we come up with a process that makes them do what we want them to do? Be stuck with either Biden or Kamala and not Manchurian candidates out of an election W. Why don't we do that for once? My goodness, we are terrible at this. All right, back here with the Steve Deace Show, brought to you by our friends over at Miracle Made. we got these sheets last year just in time for one of the worst July heat waves we've ever had, at least in my lifetime. And last summer was the first time. We've lived in the same home now for 18 years. Last summer was the first time I've never had to use the ceiling fan in the master bedroom to augment the air conditioning to be cool enough at night. And then we had the opposite. In January, we had absolutely one of the worst January freezes. I mean, caucus night, it was, demonically cold. I don't even know how to describe what January was like around here, and it held up on the other side of the spectrum as well. I mean, I just love these things. They're phenomenal. They have silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA that help you with temperature regulating all night long, and they also are very comfy. Let's not, I mean, I suppose you could regulate your temperature if you slept in saran wrap or aluminum foil. I doubt that's very comfortable. All right. But these are also very comfy, very, very comfy. And they're designed for your skin. They do what they say. They will help you get a great night's sleep. And it's why it's the only sheets that have been on our bed in the last year since they came on board. So you can try it right now yourself. Go to trymiracle.com/Deace. And whether you buy them for yourself or get it as a gift for a loved one, if you order today at trymiracle.com/Deace, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code Deace at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20% as well. So upgrade your sleep today. Trymiracle.com/Deace. Use the promo code Deace. That's trymiracle.com/Deace. Use the promo code Deace. Let's bring in our good friend Bob Vander Plaats from the Family Leader. So Bob, I don't even know where to start, man, with everything going on. So I'm just going to, what do you think? That's the best I got.
Well, first of all, let me tell you good news. In a little community, Ogden, Iowa, Darla and I were there yesterday. They had an ecumenical service. You're and Aaron's previous sidekick, Todd's as well, Rebecca Haney, Maxwell Haney, her and her husband Matthew helped put this thing together. There's something happening in Ogden, Iowa. And if that was happening in every community across the state or across the country, you would say, I think revival's on the way. And so, Steve, when you say, what do I think it's what you've said before plenty of times. It's revival or bust. Probably like you, my guess is you've been talking about this a little bit, is we tuned in Thursday night to the debate. And I remember talking to our second son on my drive from the office back to home, and he was telling me about what I was forecasting for the upcoming debate. And I said, well, you know what? I think Biden has a really good shot here to win. And the reason is because, as you guys all know, is that when you set the bar that incredibly low, typically all you have to do is show up, stand behind the podium, be able to say your name right, and you're going to win. You're going to supersede that bar. I had no idea that he could put that bar lower than what the bar was set for him. And frankly, this is what I tweeted, is that, I really kind of even feel sad for him, that he's put in this position, but others around him, including Jill Biden, including Barack and Michelle Obama, and others, his inner circle, they owe the American people an explanation. They owe the American people an apology. This isn't just about a presidential election. It's about presidential leadership on the world stage. From the most powerful country in the world yet today. So I saw a president where Article 25 should be invoked, and I saw a lot of people owing the American people an explanation and an apology.
So we had, over the weekend, we started this from my late father-in-law, who was a huge baseball fan. The last year of his life, we rented a suite at the Iowa Cubs so that he could come to a game. And we just kind of have made it a perennial Father's Day thing or thereabouts, depending on everybody's schedules since, just to get together at the ballpark. And we did that over the weekend. And my mom, and you've met my mom before. All three of you have. And I use her as kind of a plumb line for what an informed but not an informed, socially conservative but not Republican base voter thinks. Okay, and that
Could be your neighbor.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people like my mom. She was, as everybody knows, take a drink, pregnant at 15. So we were on welfare, all those government programs when I was a little kid. All right. So she absolutely thinks government should be there to do for people what they can't do for themselves, but she's not a communist and doesn't, have a pride flag or anything in her home.
Sure.
Okay. All right. But she basically just thinks, Republicans are whores for corporations, and she's mostly correct about that. So where she is at a lot of times tells me where, the informed P2, P3 voter is at. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, like in 2008, she celebrated when Barack Obama won. We broke the glass ceiling. By 2012, she's convinced he's a communist, but is never voting for Mitt Romney because he's a corporatist whore who hates her guts, hates people like her. All right. And she thinks just Donald Trump is an absolutely awful, terrible person and thinks character still ought to matter, and she just can't bring herself to vote for him. Okay. She pulled me aside this weekend. As far as I know, she has voted for like 2 Republicans like ever. Okay. Like Kim Reynolds and Ronald Reagan. All right. Like in her life. Okay. She pulls me aside and we to get to talk in the suite when it was just her and me while everybody else was outdoors watching the game. Almost like she had to say this in hushed tones so no one else would overhear. All right.
So I'm glad you're putting it on the show.
So let's tell hundreds of thousands of people what my mom told me in private. Yes. And she's like, that can't be president. He can't do the job. He can't. And she goes, I don't know if Trump came across as more presidential than what I remember, or he just looked presidential compared to whatever that is. Okay. But she's like, Joe Biden is 15 years older than me. I have, she's got her own health issues and disabilities. She's well into her 60s. She's like, he's just, and I'm speaking as a retired nurse. That guy has real issues that he needs to head off into the sunset and enjoy his sunset years and remember as much of his grandkids as he can. And, but he just can't win. I mean, to me, at this point, we have to vote for Trump. And if my mom is saying things like that to me, that is just an anecdotal confirmation of the way the Democratic Party in total has behaved since the second this debate concluded on Thursday. It's been an all-out melee. This is way beyond. This is way beyond anything Never Trump. I know because I was a part of it, so I know what Never Trump did. All right, I mean, I remember fighting Trump all the way to the convention. There was never any force multiplier of pushback in an instant against Trump at any point compared to what they have mounted and continue to mount as we are speaking right now. They are in complete disarray because they can see it too. I mean, they see the data, they see everything else. And this is something that I don't know that we've ever seen in America, at least not in my lifetime, anything like this.
And, Steve, I think it goes back to, because I've had that same conversation, not with your mom, but with several others over the weekend, and who would have been like, what, I can't bring myself to vote for Trump, but there's no way I'm voting for what I just saw on Thursday night in Biden. And now they're considering or maybe voting for Trump. But I think it speaks to a couple things. One is, and I put that in a tweet, if this would have been Trump's first debate in the 2020 election,
he'd be president right now.
He'd be president today. We would not worry about a stolen election, nothing else. And this was a situation where CNN's debate rules actually benefited him. Muting the mics when you're not talking, as well as no studio audience. People go, Trump loves to play the audience. Yes, he does. But also remember, he's had a career being on TV with The Apprentice where there's no studio audience. He knows how to speak into a camera. He knows how to address the moderators. And he did a very effective job. And by having the mic muted, all of a sudden, Biden had to talk.
It kept him out of following the moderators into a ditch where he's debating them all night long. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I think what he could have said, answer after answer after answer, and he only did it once, is when he said, I have no idea what he just said, and I don't think he knows what he said either. But he could have said that after every answer. So after the debate, so first of all, kudos to Trump, kudos to his team. His response to the January 6th question, which he knew was coming, was brilliant, and he executed it flawlessly.
Yep.
But after that debate, and I knew that, oh my gosh, this has got to be a problem for the Democrats. What are they going to do? I kept CNN on. And I'm telling you what, guys, they came out of the gate and they were hammering that this has got to stop. There is no way this guy can be our nominee. Blowing up phones, people going, Joe's got to go. But I think now, Steve, do I think Biden can beat Trump? No, I think it's more a referendum on Biden today than it is on Trump today.
It's 100% is for the first time.
But I also believe now you pull out Biden, you put in Kamala or Michelle Obama or Gretchen Whitmer or whoever it might be that you want to put in. I think the Democrats have got a real thing to explain to the American people. You have him in here as president, and you're willing to put him up again as the next president. I think anybody they run right now has got a problem against Trump, unless they can really come out of the gate strong, like a Sarah Palin strong, but then be able to maintain it all the way through the election cycle.
I agree, which is exactly why Chip Roy was right and continues to be right to call for invoking the 25th
Article
Amendment.
25, of course you should.
Force them to have this conversation. Let's get members of Congress on the floor of the House explaining. I want to know what Hakeem Jeffries, when he knew. He's up there at the White House all the time, meeting about strategy. What did he see? What was going on? Was he only there between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m.? Let's find out the answer to this, okay?
I mean, when Russia is applauding the debate because what they saw, all of our world leaders saw what we saw as well, which puts us gravely at risk. And if there's ever a time for an Article 25, it's Article 25 now. So I think Chip Roy should do it. I think the Republicans should rally around him in doing it. And let's put the Democrats on record in regards to where are you on Article 25. There is no way, shape, or form that this guy could be president of the family leader, president of any nursing home board.
I'm going to go get my driver's license renewed here in an hour and a half. Yeah, he couldn't get a driver's license.
Absolutely not. And what you saw after the debate, I don't know if people saw this or not, but after the debate, when Jill Biden's talked to him at the debate party, she is talking to him like she talks to him in the residence. Good job, Joe. You answered every question. I mean, it's like talking to a kindergartner. And guys, that's not trying to demean Joe Biden at all. It's trying to state a fact and saying this puts our country in great peril if you don't invoke in Article 25.
All right, so Aaron got his montage. I bloviated the rest of the time. Bob, you just got about 15 minutes.
Did you call that bloviation, by the way?
No, I called what I did bloviation.
Okay.
I just said you got 15 minutes. I didn't call it anything. All right, so poor Todd's been over there. All right, I can see him moving, chomping at the bit. Go ahead, Todd.
Well, a little bit of devil's advocate brought to life by several factors, including what you said about the very low bar and the apparatus of the debate ending up helping them. Steve, to start the show, you talked about you can't change the environment. Might I suggest that maybe they did? And now I don't know why, but listen, they did not have to debate. Many of us thought there was going to be no debate at all.
Exactly.
And no one is really shocked that Dementia Joe is Dementia Joe. They all knew.
No. So none of them are shocked. I think many American people are shocked.
All of the people who made sure there was a debate and I set up the rules of the debate.
Okay.
We need to be asking ourselves, why did this go forward? Because listen, it was at least the flip of a coin that if you don't have a debate, Joe Biden was going to win again. They did this anyways.
Stay in the basement.
We should have very nefarious tingles going up our spine about what in the hell is going on.
I agree. I think the same elements that were ready within hours to basically unload years of oppo via Axios against the Biden White House are within the White House. I think they're absolutely the Democratic Party elements within their own staff push them to do this in the hopes, because they saw the decline, they saw how unsellable this was, and they either wanted it to either hold up one more night so they could all just keep lying and hide him and move on and win, or have it show up so there was enough time to swap him out. I think this was absolutely an inside job the entire time. That's what I think. I absolutely believe it.
And Todd, to your point, I really thought Biden to say, I'm not going on a debate stage with Trump. His whole talk track was going to be, I'm not going on stage with a convicted felon who should never be president again. I'll go up when they put a real candidate up. Otherwise, I'm never going on stage with them. However, either his staff and others said, okay, debate him, but debate him early. So we can put this to rest that you're still capable to be president. and then that happened, and they're like, oh my gosh, that happened. Or the staff and those close to him said, no, we're going to push Joe into this. So everybody sees what we know. So now we can replace him to run. So what it is, I mean, I totally get you. When you talk about Manchurian candidate,
all of this.
Who's behind him, who's calling the shots, that's what the American people need to understand. Because that's treasonous.
Yes.
If you put somebody up there to be president and others are calling the shots behind.
Correct.
This guy's still in charge of the nuclear football.
One way we get those answers is invoking the 25th Amendment.
Exactly.
And we'd have hearings and we'd call witnesses and we'd have a debate.
That's one thing.
But apparently the Republican tards think that's a terrible idea. So we're just going to let them control the entire process all over again and then gaslight us a month from now that none of this ever happened.
Yes.
We're going to do that instead. Yeah.
And real quick, Steve, not only is it the Article 25 on Joe Biden that I believe needs to happen, but you need to have your own January 6th committee now on who knew what they knew when and that they were not exposing it. There's got to be some degree of accountability that you're propping this guy up by the jukebox and you're lying to the American people about who's really calling the shots. That would be an interesting committee about how, I mean, if a White House photographer is saying they're hiding him from us, what do the other people know?
Who's more likely to manipulate events accordingly to get Mike Johnson in his biblical worldview to make happen what you're talking about, or the very same deep state press corps that 5 days ago was saying, how dare you call that man old and crazy, and now it's saying he's old and crazy, he's got to go?
Yes.
Folks, man.
That's why we need to invoke the 25th. It's our only opportunity to get control of this process.
To me, Todd, what you're talking about, like with Mike Johnson, Chip Roy, this would be something that should unite them. This should be something that would unite them.
I can promise you from talking to Chip this weekend,
exactly.
It didn't unite him at all.
And the Democrats know this better than anybody.
But to me, that makes no sense. This is a time to put him on record. Article 25, they may be afraid, then you're getting rid of Joe, we get Kamala. Okay, well, so what you beat Kamala at that point. But understand, this needs to be exposed, and they need to be held accountable for this.
Aaron, we got about 30 seconds. You want to chime in here?
There are way too many smooth brains with R's after their names.
Correct.
Perfect.
Being the debate moderator, Aaron, you still have 27 seconds. Would you like to continue
when you drop a bomb like that, you just yield the balance of your time.
We're
good.
Done.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Pray for the country.
Indeed. We'll be back with Hour 2 in a moment. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre, and you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. You can like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you're a podcast listener, thank you. We appreciate you. If you wouldn't mind showing your appreciation for us, if you have yet to do so, leave us a 5-star review wherever you choose to podcast from. And then also make sure to hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes, follow. And that way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time. And thank you to all of you that do that for us as well. And this part of the show brought to you by our friends over at America's Christian Credit Union. You know, there used to be a time when our financial institutions respected our values, and now many of them are the ones writing the big checks for Pride Month. And America's Christian Credit Union wants to give you an opportunity to do business with somebody that doesn't do stuff like that, but shares your values as well. That's why they're the #1 banking institution right now on Public Square. They have provided a full suite of financial services for more than 65 years to families, ministers, and ministries, businesses across the country. It's not some new thing, not that there's anything wrong with that, but these folks, I know when it comes to your money, you're like, I mean, are they trustworthy? Have they, have they got a record we can rely upon? Yep. We're going on a second generation of it, in fact. And when you switch to America's Christian Credit Union, you're going to get great rates, cutting-edge mobile banking, and the convenience of more than 35,000 branches and ATMs nationwide. So why keep doing business with financial institutions that hate you if you don't have to? Make the switch to America's Christian Credit Union today. Find America's Christian Credit Union online at Americas. That's plural, americaschristiancu.com/switch. That's americaschristiancu.com/switch. And America's Christian Credit Union is a federally insured entity by the National Credit Union Administration. Well, we have always, unfortunately, on our show, never had to shy away from the pivotal role that the church has played in abrogating its responsibility and even more so its authority in our culture, which leads to many of the calamities that we are covering on a regular basis on this program. And when I first got into this job, I've talked before that I had only been a Christian for a few years when I made the switch from sports talk to news talk. And I was still learning and growing in the nascent stages of my faith and worldview and understanding theologies and things of that nature. And I just kind of suspected there was going to be this huge silent majority out there of believers that I was going to use at the time my 50,000 watt megaphone and blowtorch to rally in unison to have their voices heard. And then I realized, there's not really a silent majority out there. And I'm going to have to, even as a, junior achievement believer here, I'm going to have to do a lot more discipling and theology than I ever imagined. Because we don't have that team right now. We've gone from the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few to what's a harvest? It's kind of where we're at right now, the state of the church in America. And thankfully, there is a new outfit that is being established by people that we have some relationships with as well that want to do something about that. Similar to how when we, started Conservative Review many years ago and then merged with the Blaze, the intent is to hold the Republican Party and the conservative movement accountable from the right, because everybody else wants to hold them accountable from the left and thus move them thusly. What if we did the same thing when it came to the church? What if there was an entity that held the church accountable to small o orthodoxy rather than relevance, wokeness? We've gone from Christianity Today to Christianity Seldom to Christianity Never. We've gone from the Gospel Coalition to the Woke Coalition to the Frenchian Coalition. That's why we need this new entity we're going to preview for you right now. It's called Clear Truth Media. Steven Whitlow is here with us from Clear Truth Media. Steven, my name is Steve as well. Welcome to the Blaze, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. You have a fantastic name.
It's not bad. Not original, apparently, but it's also not bad. All right, so
there's a couple of us out there.
There is still, yes. So tell us a little bit about Clear Truth Media, how this got started, what your mission is, and some of the people that are going to be involved.
Yeah, Steve, your setup was right on. I mean, the reason we're here today is because the American church is in trouble. And I've been a part of the church from a leadership perspective for about 20 years now. And early on in my early 20s, I didn't really understand what I was seeing. But I can look back now and see that there has been a concerted effort over the last 20 years to move the evangelical church to the left. And as the church has moved, so then has the country. And so if the country is going to move back to the right, the church has to move back to the right. And Clear Truth Media exists to help serve in part that purpose by holding on to both core doctrine and also some core cultural convictions.
Let's talk about what those doctrines are, because there's been this recent crop up the last few years of what are called discernment ministries. Okay. And I even find some people whose theologies I admire and I find pretty sound are not fans of these discernment ministries for fear that they essentially become pharisaical in their, trying to, swallow a camel, basically, to use the euphemism here, rather than, actually advance the gospel forward, and that there's a false choice being made there. And a few of them that I follow, I have noticed that it's not even, it goes even beyond just, what a biblical worldview or worthy debates between Protestants and Catholics to, if you don't have this specific, and it's not even, can't even be cessationist. That's like this one specific view of cessationism, then never and combine it with Calvinism, and everybody else is a heretic. Okay, and I'm I don't feel qualified. I think that's a false choice for me, Steve. To feel like I have the ability to sit here as a singular person outside of the Word of God and determine what great men and movements of God throughout history have disagreed upon, and now I am going to be the one. All right, on the things that on the Word of God that have not necessarily been made plain to the church for 2,000 years, and we haven't always agreed on. I'm going to be the one to determine on the things that we should have agreed on centuries ago. So, what is that doctrinal authority going to be? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, great question. And I think also understanding what is the role that we are trying to play, what role aren't we trying to play? We're not an ecumenical movement in the sense of saying that everybody who applies to any type of faith belief is a part of what we're doing. We're not a movement that would say anyone who professes to be a Christian in whatever sect or segment that might mean, and you could get really, really broad in that. And so we are saying that our aim is to unify around what we would call the core evangelical doctrines, or the core doctrines of the Protestant faith, since the time of the Reformers. What have people generally believed, and what have we generally said, this is what makes us us? And so, of course, some of those things are like the inerrancy of Scripture, the Trinitarian nature of God, salvation by faith and grace alone. These are the things that have unified the evangelical faith for the last couple hundred years. There are certainly those things that have divided us. You mentioned some of them, Calvinism and Arminianism. We would say in our tent, there's room for both. Some of those things like cessationism and continuationism, we would say that's not a line that we're drawing here in this group of people. And so those are probably the two big ones that we say within that, we think that can still be acceptable evangelical orthodoxy, and we should be able to get along. Okay.
Those are important points, I think, to make. And then, of course, there's a cultural application here, too, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, there is, because you've certainly have noticed this, and you mentioned some of it in your preview, that for me growing up, I saw all of these people who I thought, well, they have good doctrine and they're professing Christ. And so they must be drawing the same conclusions I am when it comes to cultural application. And a lot of times that plays out in the political realm. But then what we noticed over the last 10 years, and then even more so in the last 4 to 5 years, is that wasn't true. And so all of these people who had supposedly good evangelical doctrine, somehow that evangelical doctrine was getting them to say, well, pro-life, pro-choice, who really knows? Advocating for things like reparations or critical theory, and saying, well, hold on, how are you drawing these conclusions? And so we have a pretty strict set of cultural convictions as well.
Give us some of the examples of that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I hit a couple of them. I mean, we're very clearly pro-life. Right. We see no biblical room for being pro-choice. We take strong opposition to critical theory and the way that has been playing out. One of our theme verses is Isaiah 59:14, which says, justice is turned back, righteousness stands far away, for truth has stumbled in the public squares. And uprightness cannot enter. It goes on to say truth is lacking. And so one of the other things that we're standing against is that kind of statement lately that's, the church ought not to be political. Well, no, I think that's a lie. I think that's a lie from both the world and the Christian left. Here's something that's interesting, Steve. I don't think the Christian left really thinks that the church shouldn't be political. I think it just thinks it shouldn't be politically conservative.
Mm-hmm. Who left the vacuum that this is required?
Great question.
Who left the vacuum that this is required?
So the TGC, the Gospel Coalition, that was a big player. But then we can also see that there were many of the things that were influencing Christianity over the last 20 years. So leadership conferences like the Willow Creek Leadership Summit, Catalyst Conference, which was in many ways inspired by Andy Stanley and people around him. And then the Gospel Coalition became a leading online entity. Christianity Today, of course, had a say for a long time. And then other publishing houses and famous pastors and speakers of the last 20 years, they've all moved to the left. And not only have they moved to the left, but they were slowly moving the church to the left over the last 20 years using those platforms.
What's your theological background, Steve, and why did you choose to get involved with this?
Yeah, so I always call myself a quasi-charismatic, semi-reformed, megachurch trained church planter. And I grew up in the Assemblies of God, and then I started working at the local megachurch. I'm in Toledo, Ohio. At the time I left, we were about a 9,000 to 10,000 person church. Literally had the word Creek in our name, and so we were kind of a descendant of the Willow Creek movement. And then during that, there was kind of the rise of the hyper-reformed movement, and so I started, like a lot of people my age, reading books by Tim Keller and Mark Driscoll and Matt Chandler and these different types of people. And in some ways, there was some really good theological training. Where I later divested from that movement was when I saw that their cultural applications were leaning hard to the left and saying, well, I'm not drawing those same conclusions as you are from the Word of God. And so I planted a church in 2016. We went into COVID, a church of about maybe 200 or so. We were in a movie theater, so we got kicked out of that. And then we still wanted to meet, but we literally didn't have a building. God presented one in June of 20. We moved in as a church of 200. And I think last week we were just under 1,000 or so. And so we've seen almost 5x growth in the last 4 years. And the two reasons why: number one, we still believe exactly what we believed in 2019. And then number two, we're not afraid to say it.
I attend one now and spoke at one 2 years ago. Totally different denominational movements within evangelicalism, and they had in different parts of the country had the same exact story. I spoke at the Calvary Chapel Church in Chattanooga, Tennessee, 2 years ago. And the pastor there, Pastor Frank, told me the story that essentially God just came to him and said, you got to man up and preach the entire counsel of God. You're not doing that. Okay, you're editing. And they had a healthy church of about 5,000, so we started doing that. And the place emptied out real quick, all right, from people that did not want to be challenged like that. And now, at the time, in the summer of 2022, when they had me down there to speak, they were back to 5,000 more, just a completely different group of people, and people that are driving in from like an hour plus away because they want to hear the full word of God. And then we go to a non-denominational charismatic church right now. Similar story with Pastor Jesse, who just flat out God convicted me that I was a complete wimp, and I was basically doing the Willow Creek Saddleback Greatest Hits album, in an Australian accent because he's an Australian immigrant, all right? And and COVID came along, and he's like, holy crap, this is maybe not, this is going to require a different, maybe God is right, and this is going to require a little bit more confrontation with the spirit of the age. We're going to close the church and everything else than I thought, okay? So, he starts getting bolder. Church almost empties out like 80% of its membership, and now it has grown to the point that we just closed on a new building because almost every Sunday it's a fire code hazard in there, especially if it's an event Sunday. Even if we add services, it's too packed. Again, totally different group of people, but people that were interested in actually hearing the full counsel of God. And I just find that interesting, even within my own limited, sphere of associations, two totally different denominations and totally different parts of the country, very, very similar stories.
So praise God on those stories. And I think that the mega church system of church growth and church structure, it died in 2020. Its leg is still shaking. And so it still has some influence. But I think the movement as an entirety is over. It's dead. Thank God. Now, it did bring some good things with it. It brought leadership back in. It brought joy, I think, and fun, rightful, enjoyment of Sunday morning into the forefront. So I don't think we throw all of it out, but we learn from it. I posit that we are entering into what I would call a post-denominational era. And that doesn't mean that denominations are bad or that they disappear. What it does mean is that when we look how much truth is lacking in the public square and how diminished the average Christian is with their core doctrine, that instead of fighting over all of the things that have divided us, it's time to unite. It's time to unite for the sake of the culture, and it's time to unite for the sake of the everyday believer. I think that's the era that we're headed into, and I think clear truth preaching is what's going to define that era. And by clear truth, we mean the unfiltered word of God. Not because we're mad, not because we're angry, not because we just hate the left, no, but because we actually believe that it is only the truth that sets people free. And if we want people to walk in spiritual freedom, we have to teach them and preach the entire word of God.
I've got somebody I know who's working on their marriage right now, and he told me I went and got this marriage book from Tim Keller. Yeah, and I didn't know how to respond, so there was silence on my end of the phone, and he goes, "Don't worry, I looked before I bought it." And he published it in 2005. And I said, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a pre-woke.
Yeah, you'll be good. You're good then, okay? Because at the end, he was literally separating his church by vax status, okay?
Yeah. Yep.
That's a true story. That actually happened, okay? With a vaccine that didn't actually vaccinate. So, what causes that? Because I know I get emails from people, well, we moved and I went to Andy Stanley's church in 2001 and he was great. You guys are way overreacting, Well, I'm like, well, that was 2001, bro. All right, have you been there since 2021? Since 2016? Yep. Have you been there since Obergefell? Okay, have you been there since then? And there's always a constant debate. Were they always like this? Were the cultural pressures just too overcoming that they just gave in? And then how do you avoid for yourself? Like I'm 50 now, Steve, and I'm praying constantly every day, let me finish the race, finish strong. And that a lot of men don't finish strong. Okay. So did they just get tired of the conflict and let me make peace at some point? Or is it just, do you think there's no general explanation here and it kind of varies by person, whether they were just a heretic all along or not?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things that could play into it without speaking necessarily to specific people. So first could be fear of man. Paul tells us this. People change the gospel because of fear of man. And so that is a rightful way or a rightful answer to saying, why do people go astray? Fear of man. James at the end of chapter 5 tells us that some will wander away from the truth, that as believers, then our hope is to pray for them, to tell them the truth, and to hope that they repent and come back. So I think one right answer is fear of man. But I do think another answer is influence. Who is influencing them, and what influence might they get if they abandon Orthodox doctrine and move to a more acceptable position by the world? And so both of those influences are temptations. And one of the reasons we started Clear Truth Media is because we don't want the everyday believer and the everyday pastor only being influenced by these voices that have gone astray. Mm-hmm. These voices have dominated the platforms that have discipled and trained the pastors of our day. What happened in 2020 was not surprising. The evangelical church was simply doing what it had been taught by the platforms that owned the day. If we're going to win again, we have to have new platforms.
I mean, if you read the Gospel Coalition website until about 2009, you wouldn't recognize it today. Christianity Today was started by Billy Graham 50, 60 years ago. If you were reading it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, you would not recognize it today. You wouldn't even know that that's the same publication. If you go listen to a Beth Moore women's teaching message from a decade ago compared to trying to basically slander the entire American church as racist, wouldn't even recognize that today. There seem to be two breaking points. You've mentioned COVID is definitely one. And I say this who has a love-hate relationship with Donald Trump for sure, okay? But yep. It does seem like a lot of people either allowed Donald Trump to break their brains, or maybe they just thought, well, now that Trump's here, I can just go ahead and just remove the wolf skin or the sheep skin and just be a wolf now. And it may, like the Southern Baptist Convention, it seems to me like the entire thing is breaking down on whether you're basically willing to be a mascot for Donald Trump or you want to call the entire church racist. And like they're not even necessarily even arguing over sola scriptura over there anymore. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, but I think it's a false binary, and here's what I think about that. All the time after, when Trump got convicted, these types of things, everyone's like, oh, you evangelicals, or are you clear truthers? You guys are just worshiping Donald Trump. No, I worship Jesus. I don't worship Donald Trump, and I don't think you have to worship Donald Trump to believe that Trump is a better choice than Joe Biden, and to believe in the conservative policies that I believed in prior to 2020 or even prior to 2016. Let's look at what happened before 2016. In 2015, Obergefell came out, and then Trump comes around in 2016. Well, we have seen the decay, an accelerated decay of our culture after the Obergefell decision, right? Then into 2020, right, all of that madness happens. At the same time, Trump is becoming president, and I think all of these evangelical leaders are using Trump's meanness, right, as a way to distance themselves from the right and moving themselves to the center. But then it's like they drank the Kool-Aid and they moved all the way over to the left. And no one ever goes a little left, right, Steve? Like the moment you open up the left, you're going to go all the way, because why not?
Well put. And frankly, one of the reasons I'm asking these kinds of questions is just because I ask myself all the time. Therefore, by the grace of God, go I. I mean, yeah. How do I make sure I don't wake up one morning and I'm like, oh no, I'm the baddie, aren't I? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I want to, it's not, to me, all the names we're talking about to me are cautionary tales, and I'm trying to warn myself, okay, to finish the race and not end the way some of the folks we just discussed have ended. And I just, I would imagine that's going to be a challenge for any entity like yours that wants to emerge to collectively call people back to orthodoxy. Is how do you avoid not falling for the same traps and stepping on the same rakes, right?
Yeah, and we have to be reminded that, anything that has happened to any of these guys can happen to us. And I think your words there of their cautionary tale is important for us to remember. It's also important for us to remember what, like I mentioned earlier in James 5, what is our hope? Our hope is for them to repent and to return to the faith. They've wandered from the truth, James 5 says. They need to come back to it. And so what do we need to do? Well, we need to be daily positioning ourselves in the truth. We need to have the right influences. That's why new platforms like Clear Truth need to emerge. It's why we need to be in good churches that preach the unfiltered word of God. And it's why Hebrews 3:13 tells us to exhort one another daily, every single day. I often compare sin or doctrinal stray to snow. The more you let it snow, the harder it is to move it away. The quicker the snow falls, the quicker you need to get it off of your driveway. Otherwise, it's going to break your back.
That's a great analogy, Steve. All right, check out their website, cleartruthmedia.com. A couple of people, we just had Joel Berry from the Babylon Bee on the show for the first time a couple of weeks ago. Megan Basham is a longtime friend of our program over at the Daily Wire. So they're a couple of the board members of this project. Cleartruthmedia.com is where you want to go. Again, you can head over to cleartruthmedia.com. Steven Whitlow, good to meet you, brother, and we'll definitely keep up with you guys here moving forward and wish you well. It is what you're trying to do is desperately needed, so thank you.
Steve, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it.
You bet. All right, guys, what'd you think?
I find this fascinating, and obviously I come at this from a Catholic perspective. I trust what the names you mentioned, particularly Megan Basham. Her vote goes a long way with me, but he's talking about denominationalism and moving away from that to more unity. As a Catholic, I obviously find that fascinating because, at least theoretically, one of the fail-safes, almost like checks and balances, would be the fractured nature of Protestantism. If one segment goes awry, the other ones will see it, learn from it, but unity ended up happening nonetheless, and he recognizes it, and it was all apparently bad. The social media sphere, the leadership sphere, the junkets that people went to. So it's, Steve, I think it's what you always say about there's always going to be some kind of authority. That
everybody's a papist.
That vacuum will be filled. Yep. And so Protestants need to be apparently more wise as serpents and say, listen, we need unity. We lie to ourselves that we can somehow get away with not having any. And now the challenge will be, what is that going to look like? Because there's going to be moneyed interests involved in this that are going to put pressure on them. It's going to be a challenge.
Yep, I agree. Which is why I asked some of those challenging questions. Yeah.
You've heard the phrase doomer before, which is basically just wallowing in the ash heap of history, wallowing in the seemingly circling the drain. And believe me, there are a lot of things in this culture, in this society, whether it's the church, politically, what have you. It's not looking good. It's not looking up, let's say that. My challenge is not to be a doomer, just speaking for me personally, because it's easy to see, despair. That's not necessarily, not at all, a virtue. We're not allowed to despair. Stories like this remind me of that, because at the end of the day, there are still people who are willing to not just say, throw up your hands, I'm just going to tend to my own little private Idaho here. No, we're going to make sure that as best as we possibly can, we're going to fill vacuums of information, of viewpoints that have been left behind by people who have substituted the truth of the Word of God for probably lies, or at least deceptions. Mm-hmm. So that's one encouraging thing. And another encouraging thing that Stephen brought up there in that interview is what happened in 2020. My church is an indication. You've said that your church is an indication that when you step out in boldness, when you have leadership at church that steps out in boldness, it's clear that there's still an appetite for truth. We talk about mega churches all around, the soft-headed mega churches all across this country. And yeah, it still is a problem. But you saw in 2020 when they closed, when the government told them to close and they stayed closed, there were a lot of people. Maybe not enough, we'll see. But there were a lot of people who said, no, we're going to go somewhere else that's actually going to open their doors and meet like we've been commanded to in scriptures. And you're seeing some of the fruit of that boldness still paying off years later. I think of another thing, even in the midst of the darkness of COVID, same thing is true of homeschooling, of actually getting involved and aware of what's being taught in the schools. I think conversations like these are important to remind us, even in the midst of the darkness that seems to envelop us, there are still some things, even 20 years ago, that you would have thought, no, never in a million years would I see that in my lifetime. I think, again, stepping into the void left behind by mega publications, Christianity Today, the Gospel Coalition, stepping into that void, filling that vacuum, that's a positive development. Not everything is darkness, and we need to remind ourselves of that. There are still people, still 10,000, still 1,000 maybe, who have not bended the knee to Baal. Yep.
I mean, and you just cited where the Lord says that to Elijah, the prophet, at his most depressed with Jezebel issuing a kill order against him. And he is reminded there's still a remnant that has not, as you said, Aaron, taken the knee to Baal yet. And I just think of when I first started the Gospel Coalition website, I didn't do a show without checking their website for potential content every single day. Now, I don't remember the last time I was on their website. All right, we'll get into the Trump immunity ruling and why it's politically irrelevant even before the ruling came down, which I can't believe I'm saying, but I will next. I want to talk to you all about a wonderful new movie coming out this weekend for Independence Day. It's called Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. It's the latest from Angel Studios, and it's a worthy successor to last year's blockbuster that Angel Studios gave us, Sound of Freedom. Now, it's not a sequel, even though they both have the name Sound in the title. But in terms of the power of the storytelling, it ranks right up there. One of the best movies I've seen so far this year. It tells the story of tiny little Bennett Chapel Church in Possum Trot, which is a little town in the woods of East Texas that just felt a conviction that it was up to them to take care of the widows and the orphans. And so they emptied out the East Texas foster care program, adopted 76 children within the barely 24 families that make up this church. It's a powerful story, and it also doesn't shy away from the difficulties. I mean, these weren't all happy endings, and they certainly weren't all happy, joyous journeys to get to the happy endings that some of the families did have. And that's what makes it even more powerful, high-quality storytelling, really well acted. Highly would recommend. I loved this movie when I saw a screener of it a couple of weeks ago, and it's hitting theaters now this weekend. So get your tickets today at angel.com/Steve. That's angel.com/Steve. Fantastic film. The Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. Get your tickets today at angel.com/Steve. All right. With everything going on with the president's fitness for office and to remain in the race that we opened the show with, I mean, I would like to go back and tell my, forget like 5 years ago. Let me go tell my March, February, January self that the day the Trump immunity ruling came down from the Supreme Court, it was going to get buried to the last segment of the show for us to discuss. Now, let me tell you why that happened. Because the ruling, by and large, is politically irrelevant. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, the Supreme Court ruling last week on the other January 6th cases, where they flat out ruled it was prosecutorial overreach and how too many defendants were charged, really just popped the bubble of that entire narrative. That entire narrative. It is now no longer edgy for Trump to say, like he did at the debate that 80 million people watched the other night, that, hey, you know, there are people in prison for this that don't deserve to be in prison. That's not edgy anymore. It's fact. There's no attack left there. Everybody that was already going to vote on the SCOTUS was already factored into the calculus. There's no growth potential in that narrative. It died with that Supreme Court ruling. And so therefore, even if they got the best ruling they could have gotten today and they put him on trial in 2 to 3 months in Washington, D.C., by then we've already seen Trump convicted in New York. By then we've probably already seen Trump in handcuffs at his sentencing. So that Rubicon has been crossed, right? That stigma's already been addressed. And now it's largely destigmatized by what the Supreme Court ruled in the previous J6th ruling. That's number one. They took a lot of the potency politically. They diffused a lot of that bomb, especially because of the way the justices were aligned. This was not a straight party line vote. Amy Coney Barrett actually ruled in favor of the prosecutorial overreach in that case. Is it Ketanji Jackson? That's
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Ketanji Brown Jackson. She actually ruled with the majority. I mean, that ruling and the makeup of it is one of the most stunning Supreme Court rulings of my lifetime. And so they diffused much of this narrative to begin with. And then number two, this is no longer a referendum on Donald Trump. It may be again between now and Election Day, but for now, and until something happens that changes that fact, it's a referendum on Joe Biden and his fitness for office. So the ruling in and of itself is just politically irrelevant. Now, in terms of the legal ruling in and of itself, the court said, and this was a straight partisan vote, the 6 GOP justices said that a president does have absolute immunity for official acts as president. They didn't define what an official act is. It didn't say he doesn't have, for criminal acts, just said official acts. So what's an official act? Well, that would have to be adjudicated. So they answered the question on immunity, and now it would be up to lower courts to determine and rule on what acts of any president should more cases like this come up. And in this case with Donald Trump, now the feds will have to go back to the circuit court and make the case that these are official acts. And then Trump will appeal. It'll make its way back up, and they'll eventually have that argument settled in a couple of years. So I was concerned because the social compact is broken. We're in a post-Christian, post-Constitution culture now. I don't want to see presidents given absolute immunity to do whatever they want. We got a president in the White House right now who, according to his daughter, took showers with her. All right. We are 5 minutes away from somebody getting elected that, pees on kids at a pride festival, guys. When your social compact is broken, you don't want the guy holding the most powerful office to have complete immunity. That's a bad idea. On the other hand, you also don't want, because your social compact is broken, you don't want the entire office of the presidency relegated to irrelevancy by being able to litigate everything too. So the Supreme Court, for now, in a pretty ingenious decision, in my view, legally, put a kibosh on that. They defined a standard without defining what applies to said standard. So this will go on and continue to be adjudicated. So an event that we were all concerned about, I said from the very beginning, of all the cases, this is the one I was the most concerned about, because I saw the way they treated many other nonviolent offenders. The polling on January 6th was terrible. But when things change on the ground, environments change. It's a little bit like, in February, I was thinking about where could we go someplace warm, because I don't know that I can finish this winter after the January we just had. And, we went to Universal Studios a few years ago. We went to Florida a couple of years. That's when we went to Florida. We went to Arizona, for a couple of years ago to see some friends. So Amy and I were like plotting out where we're going to go this February, coming out of that January deep freeze, just to get warmth for a few days. And then out of nowhere, nothing we could have planned, nothing we could have made happen, right? We end up having like the nicest, warmest February of all time. And I'm sitting in the lawn and garden section at Lowe's, like, right after Valentine's Day for the first time in my entire life, and it's actually open, okay, and I'm landscaping the yard. Couldn't plan for that, right? That's nothing. If we could control it, we'd make every February like that, right? But something happened that organically changed the conditions on the ground. And what's transpired with Joe Biden has organically changed the conditions on the ground and made this largely irrelevant. Now, what did fascinate me, and I told you guys about this when I came in this morning, is I'm sitting at the gym. It's my lifting day, so I'm at the gym this morning, and on the screens there on the wall, and they've got a screen for Fox and MSNBC right next to each other at the gym. And no sound is on. I can only watch the graphics and the mannerisms, and they're all waiting for the ruling to come down. The ruling comes down, and for 5 minutes, Fox had a lower third that said Trump has absolute immunity, and MSNBC had a lower third that said Trump does not have absolute immunity. And they, side by side, you're right, Aaron, I should have taken a picture of this. They were side by side for like 5 minutes, just told their audiences completely different things about the exact same ruling. And then, by the way, neither one of those reads ended up actually being correct. If that is not, we have metaphor alerts in this culture daily now. If that is not a metaphor alert for the state of media, I don't know what is. So, gentlemen, let me get your thoughts here in a second after I tell our audience about our friends over at Balance of Nature. So today I've got 2 or 3 appointments that I got to come back to the office for something. Tomorrow I've got a really long day. Just trying to get healthier. I'm down 33. I've got 17 more pounds to go. Hard, and then the cost of produce too. It's just hard to eat healthy nowadays if you are busy like me. Because contrary to some of you, I do work more than 2 hours a day. And that's where Balance of Nature comes in. They not only make it convenient to get the nutrition you need from fruits and vegetables, and they're easy to swallow capsules, but these each contain 31 different kinds of produce in a single day. Each dosage does. That's crazy. You couldn't eat 31 kinds of produce if you tried. All right. So just a great way and a convenient way to give your body the nourishment and nutrition it needs. I love this product. I use it daily. Can't give it a better recommendation than even after they let me try it, I'm still using it. That's how much I love it. So when you go to balanceofnature.com, you'll get 35% off plus a free fiber and spice supplement on your first order as a preferred customer if you use my discount code DACE. That's balanceofnature.com. Use the discount code DACE for the big savings. That's balanceofnature.com, discount code DACE for 35% off. But hurry, this offer is only available while supplies last at balanceofnature.com, promo code DACE. All right, guys, your thoughts on the ruling in and of itself, and any other news that has developed on this front just since we've been on the air here so far this afternoon.
Well, while this ruling may not matter going forward to this particular election, it's created a ton of havoc leading up to this point. Both this ruling and the J6 ruling, lives are rent asunder, and we need to deeply reflect, even though these were done correctly. A lot of the people who moved forward with this, the nefarious forces that moved forward with this, they knew that they knew they didn't really have a good leg to stand on. But the process is the punishment in all too many of these cases, just like Scarlett Johansson has had. They know how flimsy it is, but they just throw you into the middle of something and dare you to fight back. Most people won't, and the ones who do are in for a long haul. That something about that needs to change. And also regarding this particular court, to rule on this, that basically, hey, by the way, it's in the Constitution that the president is a constitutional office and he gets to do constitutional things. And then just last week, and Steve, you went nuts on that, and rightly so. Oh, by the way, the First Amendment is in the Constitution, and people get to use their fundamental rights to speak what they want. And you don't get to do that?
Right.
The disconnect on these rulings is mind-boggling to me.
Yep.
So
and you're speaking to two people when you say that. You're speaking to Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett when you say that, because they're the ones that we would go to explain how did you jump to these two different conclusions on what the Constitution clearly does and does not say.
Because neither conclusion is nuanced.
Right.
They're very basic and fundamental, yet opposite of one another.
Correct. Sorry, Aaron. Yep.
Well, so until we come to a point where Republicans, not leftists, understand that in order to keep power, you actually have to wield it, and in some cases, wield it viciously, in terms of what is legal under the law, you're going to have more lawfare. You're going to have more lawfare.
That's right.
Because as long as the communists in this country feel like they have to play the game of the court system in order to punish their opponents, they will keep finding loopholes. They will keep finding novel constitutional theories. They will keep finding something in order to wage lawfare, because we're still in the phase of the devolution of this country. We're still in that phase where they feel like they have to play that game. When we're out of that phase, if they have not been punished commiserately, things get really dark really fast. They get really dark really fast when they don't feel like they have to play that game anymore, and they can just throw you in prison for whatever reason. We've gotten a taste of that with January 6th on a lot of counts. But if they feel so, again, the story is a message to Republicans, because I'm just saying Republicans because that's the only not Democrat party of consequence in this country. Until Republicans realize attorneys general have to start concocting their own novel, and I'm sure there are a few in our audience that are going to shirk, going to squirm, going to feel very uncomfortable. But until either, if you can't find them on, legit constitutional grounds, legit law-breaking grounds, and there are ample opportunities to do that, until attorneys general start commiserately punishing domestic opponents with lawfare, the same way that Democrats have been doing with our guys meaning not leftist guys, you're going to keep getting this under novel theories. So that's kind of the big takeaway. So yeah, this is good news in terms of lawfare for this particular case. The law is really vast, and it's really old. So they're going to find new ways to do lawfare. But going off of what Todd said, this Supreme Court is just weird. On the one hand, I can think of, 3, maybe 4, but at least 3 just this term, 3 cases that were unanimous. You had the ruling last week on DOJ overstepping on obstruction charges. Ketanji Brown Jackson, as you said, joined the conservatives, while Amy Coney Barrett joined the Democrats. Overturning of the Chevron deference, which was a running joke on this show, but it's a serious thing that conservative right-wing legal beagles my entire life have been pining for.
And when we joked about it, it's not that we didn't think it was serious.
It was just
It's just the idea that that's
inside
more
baseball.
important than
Yeah.
child sacrifice and what is a marriage is not true. Okay.
And that's out the window now. There's another ruling, I think, this morning that seriously hampers alphabet agencies' ability to just stay unscathed from their own bureaucratic overreach. It's just a weird court, man. A weird court for weird times. And I think that's kind of where the analysis starts and stops.
You know, it is a weird court, but when you stop and think about it, is it kind of symbolic of our time?
Correct. Weird court for weird times.
For the most part, the left wing votes in a block, and you can make an argument that Ketanji Brown Jackson only crossed over on the prosecutorial overreach because she's concerned that that is done in largely black communities to black people and wants to be on the right side of that for later. Okay, so she would maybe made a racial exception there. The right wingers on the court kind of represent the American right. Okay, Again, Gorsuch is your Thomas Massey, Rand Paul libertarian. Alito and Thomas are your classic Kirkian, Buckley-esque, classic conservative, ideological conservatives out of that era. Coney Barrett is basically the kind of Anthony Kennedy on a given day. She's not David Souter because she's right about half of the time. He was never right. So we used to joke on the show back in the day when Kennedy was there. You just flip a coin. Some days he feels like a nut, sometimes he don't. And Brett Kavanaugh is your Mitt Romney, Karl Rove wing of the right. I mean, they kind of represent the current political landscape, which is weird, but in many respects, that's kind of who we are in a way. Which is how you get some very confusing rulings at very different times from the exact same people. All right, we're going to stick around and do overtime for the subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll be back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck. Until then, Romans 8:28.